Well, it looks like we have 22 people on. We might as well get started. So my name is Sarah Magnuson. I'm the fellowship coordinator here at Coraline. I'm also the program assistant, so I do it for Coraline and the fellowship. It does say that my name is Chelsea Sims on here, so if you see Chelsea Sims responding, it's me today. We share this webinar service with another group, so it gets a little confusing, so sorry about that. So on the call today is myself, Ricky Hill, and Sabrina who are two of our fellows. So I'm going to give you a little overview of the fellowship and Coraline in general, and then pass it over to them to give you a little bit more of a first-hand experience. So Coraline is a movement-building initiative designed to expand the capacity, reach, coordination, and impact of social justice work. We do this by carefully crafting programs that foster a culture of collaboration and build a network of leaders who work together innovatively, all of which is in service to win the policies, culture, and conditions that support all people's lives. So Coraline has grown very quickly and has multiple avenues of work, and be sure to check out our website to learn more about the other programs in the organization as a whole. So Coraline was launched in 2012, and it was widely recognized that the reproductive movement was in a rut. The anti-choice efforts were inundating us with about 1,000 pieces of anti-abortion legislation per year. In 2011, 92 restrictions were passed, and in 2012 to 13, 103 more were passed. You can see by this graph from the Guttmacher Institute that that's more than in the past decade combined. So it was very clear that the movement needed to change, as we didn't have any effective response. The reproductive movement really needs leaders who are trying innovative and new ways of winning the fight for reproductive health, rights, and justice. Coraline is doing this with the Generative Fellowship. The fellowship is really for leaders in the reproductive movement who are interested in creating new programs, campaigns, events, toolkits, or ways of thinking. Innovation is a word that we use all over the Generative Fellowship, and we define it pretty simply by doing something in a non-habitual way. So it's about trying something different by disrupting the habits, reframing questions, debating and disagreeing, and learning from non-traditional friends, allies, and even enemies. So Coraline's overall goal for the Generative Fellowship is to create a broad and diverse network of leaders in the reproductive justice movement who are brave enough to think and act differently in order to turn the current tide of anti-choice winds. Through the Generative Fellowship, Coraline is supporting and nurturing innovators and a culture of innovation in the movement for resources, rights, and respect for all people's sexual and reproductive lives. So the specific goals of the Generative Fellowship, we are hoping to increase fellows' ability to think outside the box in new and creative ways, create a shared language and culture of innovation amongst a network of leaders, and support the development of new strategies, tactics, and concepts for the movement. The requirements are fairly simple. We are looking for people who are curious, generative with their ideas, willing to lean into risk and discomfort, and really have an idea or inquiry that's ready for exploration, development, testing, or prototyping that would be in service to the reproductive movement. So the content of the fellowship, we really focus on these 3 R's, which are research, resilience, and relating. The research aspect, Coraline teaches a methodology of design thinking, which is a disciplined way of working on an idea that breaks down the process to get more information and feedback. Resilience, Coraline supports fellows trying multiple iterations of their idea in order to learn and keep improving. And one of our little taglines is we fail fast to learn fast, but really the goal is to bounce back and incorporate feedback and to develop stronger ideas. And the relating aspect, Coraline focuses on network building with the perspective that in order for people to build and create projects, we will need a community of support. The fellows have the support of their cohorts, previous cohorts, and of course the Coraline staff and network. So the fellowship is a 6-month program. It's kicked off by a 3-day retreat, which will be September 18th to 16th, and then it's finished out with a 3-day retreat in March from the 12th to 15th. Throughout the 6 months, you're going to be working on your project and applying design thinking to really reframe the idea and develop multiple iterations and really work towards the end goal. We'll help do this by networking with your cohorts, and then you're working in small groups to have really strong networks and connections and do a lot of peer coaching. And then to finish out your project, it will be presented in a pitch that's really a 10 to 15-minute TED-style talk. So the application requirements, we require that you create a profile on Coraline's online network, send all of these documents to me. So we need a current resume or CV, and then 2 personal statements. So one is about a page on a past project that you've worked on that stemmed from an innovative idea. And we really want to know what worked, what didn't, and what you learned from it. And then the second statement is what your current idea is, how you know it's a great idea, and how you plan to develop it. And then, of course, what you hope to get out of the Generative Fellowship. And logistics-wise, it is important that it's all in one file and sent to me. The application is live on the website, but we aren't accepting applications until May 15th. The deadline is June 15th, and we are excited to get all of this from you. This is a lovely picture of our fellows. This is the first and second cohort. So Sabrina is from our first cohort, which we have nicknamed the Flames or Flamers. And Ricky is from the second cohort, which is the Sparks or Sparklers. So I'm going to pass it over to, oh, did everyone lose sound or just Carrie? Okay, great. If other people can hear, that's great. So if you have any more questions, I would urge you to type them in the text box or the chat box, and I, along with another fellowship employee, Whitney Losh, can answer questions for you. If you have specific questions for Sabrina and Ricky, I'm going to let them give their presentations, and then we can come back to the questions at the end when we will have a question and answer round. So I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina. She's going to tell you a little bit about her project and her whole fellowship experience.
Sounds good. Sarah, can you hear me?
I can.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm Sabrina. I live out here in Oakland, California, and I'm very excited to be here to chat with y'all, and am available, obviously, during this webinar, but please feel free to shoot me an email if you've got specific questions, too. I'll put it in the chat box at the end. So the first question that Sarah asked me, predictably, was, how was my fellowship experience? And it actually took me a little while to answer this for myself, and I think that in and of itself is illustrative of how it was for me, in that it was full, the experience was full of a lot of highs and lows. And I don't say that to scare you off right away. I say that to share that it ended up being so much more than I thought it would. And oddly enough, when I got out of it, so I've just finished up, I joined the program in June of last year. That can't be right. Yes. June of last year. When I got out of it, I realized that what had stuck with me and what continues to stick with me to this day is much less about the actual project, which I'm going to talk about and still very excited about, and much more about the process and how I walk in the world, how I engage in my work, how I engage with my peers, and how I talk with my family. I mean, it just sort of, it's spread everywhere. So I think that the definition that Coraline uses of innovation, doing something in a non-habitual way, is really interesting because it's thinking back to when I decided to apply. I really didn't think of myself as an innovator, and hearing that definition, I go, that's not me. I have the same thing for breakfast for like 4 months in a row, and then I'll get done with that and then go to something else and stick for another 4 weeks. So it really wasn't something that I thought I could sort of step up and move into, but I really took that call of Coraline's of the leaning into discomfort to heart. I'm someone who tends to really like to be right, or at least look right, and have the right answers, and be very trustworthy and someone who doesn't mess up. But that can get boring after a while, and I think that I do that because I tend to stay in things that I'm good at. So this was an idea that Coraline had that spoke to me in terms of just diving into something that doesn't feel particularly comfortable. So I will say that the thing that was the above and beyond the most amazing thing out of the fellowship were the in-person convening. So that's the retreat at the beginning and end, and then I was fortunate enough, and I'll chat about that a little bit more, I was fortunate enough to be in a city with a couple other fellows. So after all of that, what actually is my project? So I lost count as to the number of times I'd be in movement spaces and themes kept popping up, questions like, I wonder how the disability rights movement would tackle this, or what about housing justice, criminal justice? And yes, reproductive justice, I should say I work in RJ. I'm executive director of law students for reproductive justice. So I work squarely within RJ and repro rights as well, since we're lawyers. Yes, RJ is intersectional, and the work calls on us to engage in coalition building and cross-movement building work, but I really don't think we seem to have much of an intentional cross-movement relationship building framework or structure, and certainly there are some organizations who do tremendous cross-movement work, but I wouldn't say that that's a hallmark of the repro movement writ large, specifically rights and justice. So the idea came to me to create what I ended up calling a visiting activist fellowship. So what this would do is this program would take 10 to 12 reproductive health rights and justice activists, pair them up with one another, and then place them at a host organization for a year-long fellowship. And the fellowship would be designed to do quite a few different things, but taking Coraline's, taking a page out of Coraline's book, I guess, I didn't have, 4 set goals that all of these things have to be met. It was really about starting something, engaging folks in connecting with one another. So what would happen is, let's say Ricky and I are these fellows, and Ricky comes from housing, from repro, and so do I. We don't have much experience in housing justice, for example, but we get paired up, and then we are connected to a housing justice organization in New York City. We visit that placement organization about 5 or 6 times a year. The goal is for us to really dive into the history of that movement, the organization's role in it, but more importantly, to build connections with our counterparts at other social justice organizations. Learn from them, bring back best practices. More importantly, find out where they failed and how they would have changed the way that they did something. And not only to build the relationships cross-movement, but to then really build Ricky and my relationship, and then the 10 other fellows, some of whom may not actually know each other. So yeah, the goal would just be to build and connect. And this is probably maybe the 3rd iteration of the project. We were asked what tools Coraline provided us to really help us along with our project, and I got to say that above all, Coraline just helped me be really good at failing and sucking at things. So, and actually enjoying that, because then what you can do is learn so much more about yourself, of course, and then the project as well. So this is maybe the 2nd or 3rd iteration of my project. It started out much bigger. It started out pulling activists from 10 to 12 social justice, but socially progressive organizations, and doing a lot of cross-movement work within that 10 or 12 group, that group of 10 or 12 cohorts. And that just felt incredibly overwhelming to me. So insofar as I just wanted to up and quit and be done with it completely, because if what I had set out to do wasn't what I was going to do in the end of the day, that felt wrong to me. But again, back to that resilience piece, like what can you actually learn when you mess up? Or maybe be nicer to yourself and don't call it messing up, but just a new iteration. Everything can be a new iteration.
Using Coraline language, of course.
Yeah. I think the other tool that was really important, and this seems, particularly as someone who's been in the movement for a while now and is an executive director, but this idea of building a network strategically was fantastic for me. It was a great tool that we learned during our second retreat, and that was essentially thinking strategically about how you network. So yes, we all know networking, go to an event, do a happy hour, ask people for informational interviews, but it became clear that good networking is about so much more than who you know, but who to strategically reach out to when you're looking for feedback, which requires you to really know yourself. What kind of a leader are you? What kind of a thinker are you? Are you more process? Are you more idea? Do you not like the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts stuff? That's all fine. You don't have to be all things to everyone. But the feedback that you're looking for when you really cultivate a network and intentionally react and interact with that network, it's not just about identifying certain people based on the substance. I'm going to put together a project on X, so I need to talk to someone who knows everything about X. But the type of feedback that I needed. Do I need to talk to another idea person who's just going to pop out a bunch of ideas and get me really excited about one particular piece of the project? Do I need to talk to a process person who can get in the weeds with me and love that? Do I want someone who's going to give me some tough love? Do I want no love at all? Do I want only love? I'd say the two sort of key pieces that this fellowship taught me and really dove in on that came up through the in-person and then our in-person convenings and then our smaller group work and then one-on-one with Coraline staff and other fellows. So those two were getting better at failing and being more strategic around my network building. I mentioned a little bit earlier that we had monthly meetings. I was lucky. I live in Oakland. There were 3 other fellows also in the Oakland area, and we decided pretty early on that we wanted to get together in person. And we did so every 3 weeks. We had dinner. And for me personally, I'm not sure it would have been the experience that it was without it. I just lucked out. I mean, I realize that some folks are not in places where you can meet with 3 or 4 other people over dinner, although, things like Google Hangout are fantastic. And better than I think over the phone, but that's just me. So it was that in-person connection. The monthly meetings were fantastic because it was at that meeting that I finally verbalized when I was going through one of my down parts that I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like it. I'm not getting as far as I should be because I was focused so much on the project piece, the deliverable at the end, and not actually how I was reacting to my frustration. So the in-person dinners and lots of wine drinking were very, very helpful.
And I will say, I do encourage people to have your friends apply so that maybe more than one person is in each area, because we really love having in-person connections, but we do encourage Google Hangout as well, since that's not always possible.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And lastly, just briefly before Rich takes over, and that is I was asked to talk a little bit about the TED style talk. I was feeling, I'm pretty good in front of people. I wasn't feeling nervous. I was feeling more ambivalent more than anything else, I think. And part of that was because talking about my project didn't really get me excited because I thought I wanted to be able to use the talk as a pitch, and my project didn't feel anywhere near ready for some sort of pitch. Particularly because, like a lot of things, you can start to sort of compare yourself to other fellows. And one of the fellows in my Oakland cohort had a whole pitch and a mission and vision statement and was going out to get funding. And I'm I'm on my 3rd iteration of something. I'm not even sure what it's going to look like. But then when I just sat down, actually it was at the second retreat where we were asked to sort of draw a story of our experience. And my story just ended up looking like one of those graphs that just goes up and down and up and down. That it was actually that process that was the most, I can't draw very well, both straight lines, that was my beautiful map. When I focused on that and to sort of talk about my origin story, I guess, or something through the fellowship, it was those ups and downs, and it was the process. And so when I refocused my TED Talk from the substance of my project to what I learned during the process, it was fantastic. It was so much fun. Turns out I can bring back those memorization skills from studying and taking the bar and memorize the whole thing. That's not important, really. At the end of the day, it's just about the process, obviously, and giving the talk. But I ended up really, really liking it, which was surprising to me. But I think it helped crystallize my journey through the fellowship and helped sort of catapult me into the next step, which is, from here on.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Ricky. And then again, if you guys have questions as participants, please type them into the chat box, and we're going to have a question and answer session towards the end. So Ricky, tell us about your fellowship experience thus far. You are in the current cohort, so you've gone through one retreat, and you're kind of in the middle of the fellowship.
Yes. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Ricky Hill. I currently live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I have been in the Land of Enchantment for a little more than 10 years, actually, which is really awesome to say. But I'm originally from Oklahoma, and I still have very, very strong ties here. That's actually sort of how I feel like I've been plugged into this reproductive justice movement building, is through my work with Oklahomans for Reproductive Justice, blogging, and then also being on the board. So that's like kind of how I'm linked in. But I have not, I think, for a while considered the work that I do, which I'll talk more about what my project is in a minute. The work that I do is being traditionally reproductive justice work, but my fellowship experience has been really excellent in terms of being able to recognize how the queer health equity work that I do is very much a reproductive justice topic, right? I think it's one of those things that's on the intersections, and I really appreciate being supported in that. My experience, like I said, has been awesome. I think that, Sabrina, you touched on a lot of the feelings that I have in terms of having it be very process-oriented rather than product or project-oriented, even though you do have this project as sort of like a template for you to start with and move forward. But similarly, I think that, the movement work that I do is constantly evolving, constantly shifting, and this fellowship has been really good at being okay with that in terms of having things change, because that's just, the nature of the climate we're in. I really feel this is just, I've been taking notes this whole time, and this is something that I really want to stress. I feel like the Generative Fellowship is more of an investment in people rather than product. And again, like building movement leaders rather than just creating like programmatic elements or toolkit elements, even though those absolutely can be components of what comes out of this generative process. But really it is about building that sort of personal, social capital. I hate using the word capital, but capacity. Let's say capacity. Capacity sounds better. Using that sort of that building people up rather than putting our focus into these like singular elements. And that has been really good for me. That has been good at, as Sabrina said, getting yourself outside of what you're comfortable with. Like really opening up ideas, opening up that thinking of expansion, right? The idea of constant generation and constant failure, which I have to say that I actually came to this Generative Fellowship from the academy. I have been in academia for far too long, and the project that I brought is sort of a bridge of my personal work and my professional work, and let me actually tell you a little bit about that. So my project is creating a community-driven needs assessment with the trans and gender nonconforming, genderqueer, gender variant community here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. using photo voice, which is it's a public health methodology, but it's used in lots of other realms. Like I know anthropology uses it, then also just like grassroots community groups use it a lot also. And what it is it's a methodology that combines photography along with grassroots social action. And participants are asked to represent their community and their point of view through the photographing of scenes that are relevant to their lives, and to an examined prompt. And for my project, the examined prompt that I came into the project with is basically, how do you conceptualize transgender health, right? And it's basically getting a group of trans folks together at the Transgender Resource Center here in Albuquerque, who is a group that I work with and have been volunteering with since the iteration of having like an actual physical space 4 years ago, which I can't believe I'm saying 4 years ago, time flies. But working with a group of trans folks from this community to give them cameras and go out and see what the issues affecting us are, because this is my community, this is the community I do work in. And coming to the fellowship, actually, like I came in with this idea of health because my PhD work is in health communication, so I'm sort of steeped in that world, right? And after a bunch of conversations at the retreat and with fellows in each of the cohorts, and then also that prompting me to like go outside of the cohorts and speak to people and actually like talk about this project that's been in my head and that has been like in the works, and that like a handful of folks have been really instrumental in like bouncing ideas off of, but this is really an expansion of that. And I have decided to shift the focus, and it's not really a shifting of like the project as a whole and like the mechanics of it, but going from health to the idea of wellness. Magical, right? It's like, to me, that was just like a key that was turned, where it was like, oh my God, that opens up so much more, because it takes it beyond the clinical. It takes it beyond, you know, thinking, well, if I'm not, you know, sick, whatever that means, right, then I have nothing to talk about. Or if I'm not like medically trained ways, I don't have anything to talk about. But wellness is about a whole lot of things. And another component of that I think I've gotten from the fellowship is this idea of resilience. And trans folks are resilient people. Like, we figure out ways how to work within all of these systems that, you know, we have to work within. And so switching this idea to wellness, to me, really reframes into that resiliency. And I'm so excited about that, because I finally feel like I'm excited about doing this project, which I hadn't been excited about doing it for a while. And it just felt like I was trudging through it, and I just had to do the damn thing and be on with it. But this has actually really re-energized me in terms of what I'm actually focusing on. That reframing is just, it's amazing what can happen when you have conversations with people who aren't used to hearing about your project all of the time. So it's been really helpful in that regard. So in terms of like the 3 R's and the tools that I've received from the Coraline Fellowship, moving a little more into the project work and then also just greater professionally. Research for this project, myself, I felt like I had just like dug myself into a hole of, but coming and meeting with folks who are outside of my discipline, I'm in communication, I'm in public health, and so I feel like I have those literature bases. But speaking with people from legal backgrounds has been amazing. Speaking with people who are not in academia and who do strictly grassroots movement building has been amazing, because I am over at the Transgender Resource Center, which is a very grassroots organization, and you know, I don't think I do enough networking with other grassroots organizing folks. I think that we feel pretty geographically isolated here, so that has been really helpful also. So that moves me into the resilience piece also. Like, I'm in New Mexico. We're a traditionally like under-resourced state, so just having access to a national network has been invaluable to me, and I am and will continue to be. getting that feedback has been great. I use the I wish if model all of the time now, which is actually really helpful in terms of me being able to take feedback and not take it personally. Again, building on that resilience piece and relating. Again, I can't say enough about the not just professional networking that happens, which has been really amazing. And I think will continue to really foster my growth as a leader in this movement and as a steward of my community. But also the personal relationships. That to me has been the best part by far. You know, I came into this knowing a little pocket of people, hi new friends, having like a little pocket of people that I knew regionally through like Oklahoma and through reproductive justice. But this has really just fostered growth in ways that I really wasn't expecting, like personally. I think my partner would tell you, like, she's just like, you just design think everything now. I'm like, I do, I really do. But I think that it's, again, I think that it's a really transformative process. And it's only 6 months. Like, I am blown away by how short this fellowship is. Because I started in, February, and it's only a few months in, and I feel like the amount of growth is just, it's really remarkable. So I can't recommend it enough. But if you want to know, like, a little more about the ins and outs of what my experience has been like, I haven't had the good fortune of having folks in my physical proximity to be able to meet with, but I did get to go to CLIP in Amherst and was able to see a bunch of other generative fellows who went to NILME, which is something that I would not have been able to have access to had I not been part of this, which that's the new leadership networking initiative out of the Civic Liberty and Public Policy Conference, CLIP, and then NILME acronyms that I didn't know until recently. So again, just like that building has just been, it's been really phenomenal in the short amount of time. So I'm really excited to just see where the next 3 months take me.
Great.
Yay.
So I guess I just wanted to ask a few questions of you guys. So Sabrina, was there anything that you got out of the fellowship that you weren't expecting at all?
Yeah.
Care to elaborate?
Yes. I mean, I have to say that I actually didn't go in with a lot of expectations, which is unusual for me, but I went in just because I didn't think of myself as an innovator, but was chosen and therefore kind of excited about it. I just decided to kind of take what came at me, which makes me sound like a passive person, and that's not really the case. But because I didn't have very specific expectations, everything was a surprise to me, honestly. I mean, I think the biggest piece was just how much the resiliency and failure piece stuck with me. I think that was probably the most surprising, and that I was pretty comfortable sitting in that sort of uncomfortable failure resilience place. But, I mean, I have to echo Ricky a million times about the connections made with one another, and having that be the piece that sort of pulls you through and pulls new things out of you that you didn't really think were possible. And then just to answer Ruth's question really quickly about how many hours we put into the fellowship, I think it completely ranges. I mean, there was, I'm being really honest, about 3 weeks into the fellowship after the conference where I was starting to feel really bummed out. I probably did not touch my project for about a month or so. So like no hours per week for a month. Because I just needed to name that I was frustrated, step back, focus on other things. And then, yeah, I think Chelsea, I think Sarah, your guess is probably pretty accurate, 5 to 15 hours a week. Obviously leading up to the TED Style talk was a lot more. But so I was probably closer to sort of 5 to 7 hours a week.
Great. And Ricky, what do you feel like was the most important part of the first retreat for you, since you've just experienced one retreat thus far?
Just being able to meet people and be able to actually dig into the content of the framework and be able to really begin to understand what design thinking is and how you can take this concept that is from, I think a very business-y paradigm and really use it in these transformative ways, which, I think took definitely beyond the retreat to wrap my mind around. But just a really good space to have that introduction and be able to talk to the cohort ahead of mine and see how they were able to apply those concepts and how they were working, and really see how it was okay to fail, and how it continues to be okay through that process. So I would say really being able to dig into what this framework is. Mm-hmm.
And for participants, so we use design thinking a lot, and I gave a little bit of a brief intro to it, but it's really from the Stanford Design School, and was developed for product design, but we've shifted it for movement design and social design. So it's really, we do understand it's a little hard to wrap your head around at first, but it's definitely, I think it helps all of our fellows, and I mean, you two both said that it's really helped you, so it's great.
Sarah, can I say one other thing that came up from Susan's question about affiliation with an organization?
Yes,
that I just wanted to hone in on is something that I think is not only unique but really wonderful about this particular fellowship, and really everything Coraline does. For those of you who have been involved with Coraline's conversations or meetups, you know that a big piece of what they ask you to do is come as yourself, as an individual in the movement, and not as a representative of an organization. If you haven't been involved with Coraline before, that's what they do. And the same holds true of the Generative Fellowship program, and I think it's really wonderful. I think it allowed me anyway, I'll just speak for myself, it allowed me to show up in probably a more vulnerable way to the project, of course, but to the retreats as well. That is, okay, I'm not here on behalf of my organization, I'm not here as the public face or the leader of my organization. It's about my story. What I've learned certainly as part of being involved in my organization. I mean, you can't separate those completely, and I don't think you should. But it's about the story and the strength that I personally bring, which is why a lot of the retreat is focused on finding your own strengths through various tests and, connections and tides and triads and all sorts of stuff. But that I think ultimately, and my guess is this is what Sujatha and Coraline folks had in mind, is that by focusing on those individual strengths, we're just going to make the organizations and the movement that much stronger. So as much as you can separate yourself from the organizational hat that you wear, I think you're going to get even more out of it.
And I would just chime in on that and say that I don't really have, the organizational affiliations that I have are very, I think, compartmentalized in a lot of ways, and I don't have a movement job, and I think that a lot of folks in my cohort and in the other cohorts, maybe have, again, tenuous affiliations, but not, we're not here on behalf of an organization. And that, again, would echo saying that that's probably one of the best things to come of this. And also, there aren't a lot of opportunities like this for folks that don't have affiliations. I think that being able to have professional development in ourselves is really amazing, really.
Yeah. So Sarah, you have a question. Are there any funding opportunities exclusively available to fellowship alumni to carry their work forward? So we don't currently have any funding opportunities for the alumni, but we do have a listserv that we keep going, and we like to send out any opportunities. I hope that answers your question. I don't think, yeah, okay.
Well, I think another tool that Coraline provides is not only the staff, Sujatha in particular, as a very well-seasoned funder or fundraiser, but is the connection with other folks in your cohort. So, for example, someone that I did a breakout group with during the second retreat needed some connections to program officers that I had through my LSRJ work. And so it was like, absolutely, no problem, I'll connect you. So that stuff happens pretty organically as well.
And then Carrie, what proportion of past cohorts have done projects with global scopes, focusing work outside the U.S.? I would say most of it is pretty U.S. oriented, but definitely not all of it. Maybe 2 of every 20 of each cohort is global focused. And I think it's important that we have that because we need a range of projects and scope, and so I do encourage you to bring a global idea. And for Ruth, so who trains and facilitates? So Sujatha, who is the director of Coraline, is one of the main facilitators at the retreats, and then we have a few consultants who work with us. So Viveka Chen is one of our consultants who is, she's a coach and avid meditator, and she's really amazing in bringing in like the calm, but also the calm, and she is able to incorporate meditation and design thinking somehow. I don't know how she does it, but she's pretty incredible. And then we have Alan Silva, who worked for IDEO, which is a design thinking firm, and he's all about innovation and design thinking, and he's really an expert in the field.
And then regarding the fellows.
So at each of your retreats, so for the next fellowship, this September retreat will be the last retreat for Spark, which is the cohort that Ricky is in. And so it's their last retreat and your first retreat, so you get the chance to really learn from them. And then for the next cohort, which would be the March retreat for the current, you would be finishing out a retreat while the next cohort steps in. If you guys have anything to add, please feel free. And yes, if there's any other questions, please type them in. Thank you, Whitney.
Does my response go, my chatting response go to everyone?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
And I do encourage you to look at the fellowship team, or the Coraline team, which Whitney put in the chat box. And I also encourage you to look at the fellows. We have all of our fellows on the website, so you can look at their projects, what the updates are. Most of them have Twitter handles that you can follow them on Twitter. Yeah, it's a really great resource to really figure out who is in the fellowship currently, what their projects are, kind of the background of what the Coraline Generative Fellowship is.
Yay!
Yeah, so if there's not any more questions, I think we might end here, but definitely feel free to email myself, Sarah, at the email listed there, Sarah Magnuson, or sarah.magnuson@coraline.org. The retreats have all taken place in the Bay Area, and the next 2 will as well. So
I was going to use that as another little enticing piece. Just got to say, turns out that Northern California has amazing retreat centers with hella good food and hot tubs.
There are. So yes, I think the September retreat will be in Tamales Bay, so you can enjoy some oysters by the ocean when you have breaks. And then the second retreat will be at the Mayacamas, which is where we actually had the last retreat, and it's a great outdoors, lakes, hiking trails, beautiful cabins. It's very wonderful.
Yay.
Any last questions? Right. Well, I think we're going to end it here. And again, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to email myself or Ricky or Sabrina. And thank you all for joining this webinar. We hope to see your application soon.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.